present with a case of the itis? If so, well, too bad. Welcome to those who are joining us for our afternoon session, as well as the people streaming in via Facebook. We are jumping into our segment of the afternoon, which is Tech Facilitated Creative Solutions. And this session looks explicitly at how the digital innovation enables creative industries and creative economies. And before I welcome our next speaker on the stage, I'd like to remind you to please tweet about these sessions, tweet about everything that you're learning about using the hashtag #OwnYourForce. I'd like to welcome on stage Tamara Schultz, who is a creative consultant working at the intersection between performing arts, education, and environmental justice. You can actually read more about her bio in the booklets that were provided in the conference booklets, and would like to welcome Tamara up on stage. Thank you.
Height issues. How's that? All right. Hi, my name's Tamara. I'm from a very small, nascent organization called Flying House. And I'm going to start with a joke. What is the difference? Wait, I'm going to forget my joke. What is the difference between an independent performing artist and a pizza? A pizza can feed a family. It's a very old, very bad joke, and one that I hope will become very dated and irrelevant in the not too distant future. So, do I have a clicker? Yes, I have a clicker. Am I doing that? There we go. So Flying House is for artists. We believe the future is creative, but we also know that for artists right now, at this moment in time, the struggle is real. And the problem, I'm going to talk more about a problem than a solution, because I think solutions come out of understanding problems in a deep way. So I'm going to just tell you about our journey so far. So one of the things we've realized about the present moment for freelancers is that we are burnt out, busy, and broke. So think about that for a moment. It's okay to be one of those things. It's okay to be two of those things. If you are broke and busy, that's okay, but at least you still have your health. If you are busy and broke, well, yeah, you get the picture. All three is not sustainable. So I'm quoting Krogan here, burnout is an occupational hazard in the arts. There's no doubt that artists face particular issues, which are largely to do with the fact that so many work outside institutions, often alone, and they have no structures to assist them or any kind of financial stability. Burnout is a challenge for anyone who works hard in a competitive and unrelenting profession, but there are particular issues for those in the arts industries. I'd say a major pressure in the arts comes from living a life of constant financial insecurity. Artists work very hard, usually in multiple ways on several different projects, but this labor seldom gives you a regular income. So you're coping with stresses that don't have to do with your work, but are a result of it. So that busy, in the burnt out, busy and broke, is not I'm busy, I'm working, I'm making products, I'm making an income. It's busy, I'm busy trying to get the work in order to get the income. And that brings me to one of the aspects of the problem that we want to solve, which is capturing audiences' attention in our busy, overcrowded attention marketplace. And I don't know if some of the other presentations have touched on this. I know it was in the conference brief, in a way, but just to quote one of the independent theatre makers from a support group, that I attend, we have to have support groups. You have to be the admin person, the marketing person, the tax expert, the fundraiser, the event planner, the choreographer, the lighting designer, and the performer all in one body. And partly this is because of what we've been saying forever is a funding crisis in the arts, which I would query and question and say I think it's a value crisis, not a funding crisis, but more about that later. The point is we are resourceful. We're a resourceful bunch of people. And there's a lot of talk in education circles about the need for grit and resilience and growth mindset, and I think we have those in buckets. So we've got that problem on the one hand. And on the other hand, we have this buzz speak about the 21st century skills, the skills that we're needing in the fourth industrial revolution, in a digital economy. We need creativity, we need collaboration, critical thinking, communication. And so I don't know if I have these stats on this presentation. But yes, I'm sure you're familiar with many of these stats. So the World Economic Forum has said that by 2020, that's next year, the third most important skill for survival will be creative thinking. So any theatre graduate knows that these C's, the critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity, what I'm calling the 4 C's, that they come standard with the training. If you trained in the performing arts, you know how to do these things. So if these are the skills that are going to be needed to surf our uncertain future, then why are artists still having a tough time? Flying House is asking, how might we solve this problem? How might we connect business with artists who have those skills? So we want to help artists to package their ideas, their practices, and their processes in a way that people who don't speak the language of theatre and performing arts can understand how to consume them. So we're in the independent performing arts space. We're not attached to any mainstream institutions. And our original vision was to create a hub, a physical hub, a place where we could share rehearsal space and keep costs down, essentially, by sharing resources. For our launch, we came up with the idea of the Creative Stock Exchange. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show you the video, but it was a busy, noisy, chaotic night at the Museum Africa in Newtown with Captain Tumi Morake at the helm. And the idea was that we provided a pitch panel for artists to try and reach producers. We had a Dragon's Den type of setup and various other mechanisms. So we're asking, can creativity be commoditized? We're asking, I don't know if you can read those questions for yourselves. What is the worth of what you do? How can you measure the types of impact that we know theatre can have when a lot of those things are intangible? So we had a crazy, chaotic night. We had people exchanging portraits for poems. We had people writing poems and selling poems. We had a whole lot of deliberately playing with the idea of worth and value. So can you charge someone to lift you up if they're a dancer and they're good at lifting people up? How do you break down elements of what you do into tradable, commoditizable pieces? For many people, there was an actual result in the sense that they caught the attention of producers who they wouldn't have otherwise been able to pitch to. They got contracts, and in some cases their work was produced. The idea was to bring the metaphors of capital and the metaphors of a stock exchange, a trading floor, a sharing and exchanging, a pitching and investing into a kind of a playful space. And at the end of it, we were burnt out, busy, and broke. So it might have just been one of those situations where we all went our separate ways, except I couldn't let go of the idea and thought that it needs to be a digital platform, that we need to create a marketplace where people can list their stock, find ways to value their stock, to let the marketplace determine value for their stock. And stock can literally be anything from an arts-based product or service, a production that could work very well in a school curriculum, something that can operate as a team building in a corporate environment, anything that you feel goes beyond this model of having to sell tickets, right? Because bums on seats as a financial model is not working for theatre. So if we start thinking about the tech solutions that could help solve this problem, there are, how am I doing for time? Just so I know how, 2 minutes, okay. There are the obvious things about trying to capture people's attention. And I think we're not doing those things very well at all at the moment. And it's interesting that I've just heard somebody saying last night when we were chatting about this, that he says the marketing for theatre is terrible. I never see any marketing for theatre. And I'm like, all I see is marketing for theatre, and I'm not interested in it. And that's obviously because in the social media spaces that I occupy, it's being thrown at me all the time. So I don't know that the algorithms are working for those of us who are busy battling away in our hamster wheels. There are many ways in which tech is obviously working from an aesthetic point of view. And the thing that I think makes this difficult is that theatre makers are very protective over this idea that what we sell is live experience. They're mistrustful of the idea of putting on a pair of VR goggles to have a look at the play, of sharing too much content online because they don't want to give too much away, because they want the people to come through the door and sit on the seats. And there's something about our value proposition as theatre, as live theatre, which is that when you're in the room with the live body, that's the experience that can't be duplicated and can't be replicated. That's our value proposition. That's what we're trying to sell. So we don't want to give that away too much, but we also don't want to dilute it by having the remove of a screen. So I think it would be nice to discuss this more in the panel sort of setup. I'm just trying to give you a taste of what it is that we are trying to create. But essentially I would summarize it into, currently we're not capturing attention adequately. We need a mechanism to allow people to list their stock, trade their stock, and find currencies. So we have created an exchange on the community exchange system. I don't know if you know the site, the CES system, but that's just that's a direct trade, right? So, well, not a direct trade, but you would not be able to accrue any value for what you do. I think I'm not explaining that very clearly, so when I have more time in the discussion, I will go into it in more detail. Is that good? Thank you. Are we going to sit here? Okay.
Thank you so much for that, Tamara. I know when she mentioned burnout, I could see a lot of you nodding because you can relate to that. I'm quite excited for our next speaker as well. Having been a Mandela Washington Fellow myself, hey girl. It's exciting to have Marvin Madiara come up here. He has over 15 years experience in advertising, media, and technology, and is a self-confessed VR junkie. I hope you speak to that. What is a junkie exactly when it comes to VR? Please welcome on stage Marvin Madiara.
Okay, Trevor, I'll say, is it on? All right. Okay, while we're waiting for my slides, I'm not a VR junkie. I'm an AR junkie. So we can have a long conversation where I will tell you AR can do this, and I'm sure the people in the industry know. Okay, so today we're talking about the future tech in how it's going to bridge the gap between culture and revenue. One of my favorite people, I'm sure we all know who that is, by raise of hands. Okay, are you guys from Mali? Okay, so that's the man who put Africa on the map. I mean, like, literally put Africa on the map. He had so much money back in the 1200s from Mali. At some point, he's seen going on his pilgrimage from Mali to Saudi Arabia, and he passed through Egypt. They say he spent so much gold in Egypt, there was inflation in Egypt for the whole decade. He moved around with 60,000 as part of his entourage. Okay, some of my notes. Okay, so Mansa Musa was worth 400 billion, they say. And why I chose them, it's basically, I was trying to picture a scenario where we have Siri back then, in the 1200s. So imagine Siri is helping Mansa Musa to move from Mali to Saudi Arabia. But him being from Africa, I'm sure that time even up to today, we have our sort of old and new cultural values where you have to address old people in plural. I don't know if it happens in South Africa. In Zim you do. You don't say, like to say, how are you to an old person is like disrespect. So if it could be translated in English, something like how are yous, So I'm just trying to think if when Mansa Musa is lost somewhere in Egypt and Siri also having been taught, the cultural values in terms of the machine learning, Siri would find it a bit difficult for her to tell Mansa Musa that he's lost, Picture something like Siri going, excuse me, Your Supreme Highness, lead of, in 300 meters, turn right. But anyway, I digress. So culture, diversity does really matter in the new frontier where we're going. It fuels innovation, new ideas, and new economies. That's why we are here. So cultural diversity and social inclusion is Africa's gateway to playing a leadership role in the fourth industrial revolution. I would put a dash and say, me. So if we do not sort out our cultural differences and become active players in the global economy, we won't have to blame AI data when it starts misinterpreting things in the future. Maybe just to bring out that thought a bit, maybe let's just get 30 seconds of your time. You can play the video. I'm sure you guys know this, but I thought it was a bit relevant to the point that I was trying to make. Okay, so there's a video that's supposed to play now, just a few seconds. I hope it plays, otherwise my point wouldn't go home.
Sir, I want to spend the rest of my life with Tandy. I love her. And I brought Zilibola here to prove it.
What's this?
It's the kettle. You said 50, right?
When others don't make sense, we do.
You got the 1-year warranty. But this is forever.
So imagine if AI is a bit messed up, like how the world is messed up now, later in the future, failing to interpret some of the things. But anyway, so my name is Marvin Majigara. Okay, he's going back. My name is Marvin Majigara. I'm from Harare, from a company called Digital Africa Lab. At Digital Africa Lab, we basically a digital art agency with people that are sort of 360 in the communication science. So what keeps us busy most of the time is your digital marketing, a few documentaries, and those are some of our clients there. We have UNESCO, the Italian Embassy, Stuart Bank, and other clients, you know. So recently, for the past 2 months, we've been shooting some documentaries back home on a very interesting subject of intangible cultural heritage. You know, I can't shed much there because of contractual issues with the client, but why I brought about this slide, it's during the process of inventorying and documenting intangible cultural heritage, that's when I got to know about how big, you know, the cultural economy is and the great need that is there for tech to actually uplift, you know, that sort of economy. So as Digital Africa Lab, on our tech side, we are developing a platform called Swagify. I don't know if you guys have heard about Swagify. So basically, Swagify is in 3 phases. I'll just explain one phase of Swagify, which is the augmented reality aspect. Picture you are watching your favorite music video on DSTV, or you are at a live show, you know, and one of your favorite artists, let's say Davido, is wearing a sneaker that you like, you know. Usually you would see the sneaker, see it's a Nike, and then after the show you go home, Google, and look for that particular shoe or trousers or jacket. But Swagify allows you to actually buy as you see it, you know. So there's a lot of augmented reality involved, there's a lot of 3PL involved. Basically you see it, you scan it, and then the logistics start happening behind the scene. So it's not just a tech product, but the side of the business, there's a lot of 3PL that is involved. So that's basically what it is. And then we're saying from just a commercial platform, we are sort of seeing a need because of the work that we've been doing in the intangible cultural heritage space. We're seeing a need for us to actually, I wish this thing was like this side. Okay. So that's what Swagify was when we started. It was all about the commercial side of things. But because of that need that we saw as we're doing the work we're doing in Zimbabwe, seeing a lot of people that have so much talent in the cultural economy, we thought to ourselves that we need to use Swagify to sort of put our contribution, you know. So Swagify's vision is to teach, like have a computer vision AR engine that will learn how to identify and analyze African intangible heritage elements in music videos. So by doing that, what we are simply doing at Swagify is, if we can be able to sell the Ndebele beads, we can be able to sell the Ghana fabric through music videos, where videos are watched by over hundreds and hundreds of million people on YouTube and stuff, just converting 10% of those, by doing that, we are actually feeding into the cultural economies. So we think Swagify is going to be an answer in terms of building an industry for the people, especially our old mothers that make these nice beads, they make these nice dresses, So Swagify is going to actually connect them to the rest of the world. Currently, the web is doing that through Etsy and other platforms, but it has to be more exciting. So disrupting the music and fashion industries is the key and gateway to a sustainable cultural economy, according to us at Swagify. And why music and fashion? Why, from the business point of view, why we chose that? Like in 2018, the music industry was worth about 60 billion US dollars, which is almost R1 trillion, in 2018. And then, okay, from technology to technology, this must not happen. But anyway, I have a few slides left. So, and then even in the fashion industry, I think last year it was around 43 billion, in the apparel industry. But if you check the global statistics that we get, especially on music and fashion, it's not a true picture of what the industry is worth. Because no one has been to Limpopo, no one has been to Harare or deep in the Makayas in Ghana to find out how much the people within the cultural economy are making, So Swagify's vision is to also answer that. As we are going to start by doing what we're doing, eventually we want our AI to be able to read that, So I see my ladies coming here. And then, so we are Swagify, and we want to get the world Swagified. Thank you.
I think the great thing about being an MC is the amount of power it gives you. When you stand up, the speakers shake because they know, right? Introducing our last speaker, Usman Haq is the creative director and founding partner at Umbrellium. And what's interesting is that he trained as an architect. So I'm really interested to hear how that translated in the work that you currently do now. A round of applause, please.
I have a little bit of a tech situation here, so I've got a bit of a low-tech way to be able to show my presentation. So if you bear with me for just 1 second. Basically doing a hack to chain this computer to that projector. Because I didn't have my Apple dongle with me. Which is going to be a kind of a feature of what I want to talk about, which is engaging cities. So if you could bring that up over there, I would appreciate it. So yeah, as you heard, I am trained as an architect. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work of Umbrellium. I run a company called Umbrellium and spin out companies from that, and sometimes organizations doing things. I'm trained as an architect, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm still practicing architecture. Now, around the world, cities are investing in technology. They are bringing in technology to solve problems. This is happening in Asia, this is happening in Europe, this is happening in Africa, this is happening in America. Cities are bringing in technology to solve problems, and as we know with the issues that Johannesburg has been facing recently, I'm pretty sure that Johannesburg is doing the same thing. I've only been in the city for about 12 hours. I came in for a talk yesterday, but I understand just how complex the issues are that you face here. I'm not going to comment specifically on that, but let me just talk about two issues that arise from this fact. First of all, problems, right? If I asked everybody in this room, what is the problem in Johannesburg? I can almost guarantee there would not be a common single way to define that problem, right? Everyone will have a slightly different perspective, a slightly different understanding, a slightly different idea of what the problem is and even how it can be tackled. So that's the first issue with kind of looking at technology to solve problems, because technology is really good at single, well-defined, calculable problems, but it's definitely not good at solving complex or managing complex issues. The second issue is the technology side of it. Almost all of this technology is being produced by a very small group of people, frankly, usually young white males sitting in Silicon Valley, who are making a lot of decisions. In fact, we heard a little bit referred to earlier about AI and about algorithms. The presumptions and the assumptions behind all these algorithms are being made by a very small group of people on behalf of all these other people, you and me and everyone else around the world, and the way we're going to live in cities and the way we act in cities. And so this is the context that I'm trying to work in and that I'm trying to challenge, which is what is kind of starting to be known as the smart city. You know, the smart city that's supposed to be efficient and optimized and secure and convenient and all these kind of things, where the definition of each one of those words has been defined by somebody else. Somebody else has decided what is optimum, has decided what is safe, has decided what is convenient, not us. And so every single one of the projects that I'm trying to work in is trying to challenge or chip away at some aspect of that. I'm going to give a few little examples, but it ranges from everything from designing an Internet of Things platform that is explicitly open and is actually at the fundamental layer of network protocols, redefining an open system rather than a closed system, basically an IoT platform that everyone can use and everyone can make use of. There's also projects that are all about short-term events where there's hundreds or even thousands of people that come together to build big structures. In the lower left-hand corner was in the city of Toronto, where we looked at using zip lines as an agile transportation system to kind of imagine a different future for our cities that are carbon-free. And then in the lower right-hand corner in city of Bradford, where we built a kind of a technology layer to the public space that specifically opens up to members of the public to reconfigure that technology so that they decide how the sensors work, what they connect to, what they control, et cetera, et cetera. And this is what I call engaging cities, not about smart cities. It's about engagement, getting people involved in the fundamental questions and decisions and the impact that is actually going to be in cities. What this means is that you need to think about technology in a way that isn't about reducing problems, isn't about kind of trying to make everything easy, but instead that recognizes that there's complexity, that there's unpredictability, and there's diversity, that actually the technology should be there to support and maybe even make the issues more complex, make them more messy. You know, from that is where, through that risk, is where I see the value coming from. Because when you are trying actually explicitly to make things more complex, to embrace the challenging opinions, when you're not trying to reduce everyone to speak the same language or have the same opinion, then you get unexpected outcomes. That's how you get innovation. And so I'm looking for ways to really sort of get more and more people involved in those kind of processes. All of these images are from some of our projects. Ultimately, for me, technology is not about efficiency. It's not about, oh, you know, it's the fastest thing or the seamless experience or what have you. It's ultimately all about what is the connection that you can make from one person to another so that they can do something that they didn't think they were going to do or that they didn't think they could do. And when you do that, when you're sort of structuring this kind of engagement and you're developing this sense of agency, which is the kind of the capacity to actually achieve something, that's where I see again and again in the projects around the world that we're doing, a sense of responsibility arising. You know, that people are involved in something. It might be a risky thing, it might not work, but simply because they're involved in it and they're making some kind of decision about it, their responsibility for the outcome is cemented. And even if it doesn't quite work, they have that impact. And so quite often, although we're based in London, we're sort of working with different organizations around the world. Quite often our challenge, if you like, is to be a bit of a trust broker between many different parties who have very complex conversations to have. And that's always a difficult question, especially when you're working with a governmental organization, because they can't be seen to do something that goes wrong. But on the other hand, if they aren't willing to take that risk, then they're not going to find something that people actually think is right. And so ultimately, every one of these projects is in some way trying to kind of connect those things together. I showed an image earlier on of the burble, just to give you some kind of images from this. This was in Singapore about 12 years ago. Basically, we got together hundreds of people to design, build, and then construct an 18-story structure. It's made out of balloons and carbon fiber. And they were the ones who controlled this, who kind of created those colors, who generate that. And although it was a kind of a short experiment, it was an event-based thing, this was probably the first time that these sort of 200-300 people had actually built something at the scale of the city. You know, it's as big as the high-rises around it, around the space. They actually had an effect on the horizon. Starling Crossing is something that we built a couple of years ago, where we are trying to imagine the street when it can actually respond to people rather than vehicles. And so here we created an interactive pedestrian crossing that would appear where the most people cross and in the safest location for where people cross. So at night, it could appear outside the cinema where people are coming out, lots of people are coming out suddenly. In the morning, it can move to where the school is, because that's where school kids are crossing. And it basically can learn over time. This is something we actually built. It's not a render or anything like that. It's waterproof, you know, that takes the weight of vehicles and everything. Cinder is an example of a project where we actually went into a new urban development. And what we did was, over a period of 2-3 years, working with the local community and with students in this very high-tech building, we co-created with them the idea of having a cat that is connected to the sensors in all of the building and the sustainability systems. And so this augmented reality cat, which they named and they designed the behaviors for, is basically representing things about the weather, the temperature, the energy use, and all these kind of things. The students can learn about these effects, and then every now and then the cat disappears onto the network and appears on one student's laptop. We did this in conjunction with the curriculum and with the teachers, and begs for food. Now, the student has to think about how much energy has been generated by the solar panels today and how much resource has actually been used, and can I feed the cat? And so they're making a decision about this thing that they care about, which is the cat, which is actually the building itself, and they're being able to kind of think at a wider level about that building. Just two more projects very briefly. VoiceOver is a project we've done now in a number of different communities. It's in a sense a very low-tech project, although it does use the internet. And it's basically a social radio. And we deploy these with communities where it's a radio that can be used in two directions. Actually, technically three. You could use it just for yourself to store your messages. You could use it to send messages out, or you could use it to broadcast in. And the community decides what to use this for. So in the north of England, when we did it in East Durham, it was used by the local community to tell bedtime stories. It was used to tell knock-knock jokes. You know, it was ex-coal mining area, so a lot of the elder generation used it to tell the rest of the neighborhood about their experience in coal mining. In this video here, it was in a tower block, which is actually filled completely with people who had not been born in London. So it's basically all immigrants there. And it was used for them to share their stories about where they're coming and where they're going. And then we worked with the trans community down in Brighton in the south of England, where there it was actually a very closed network where people could share their experience with each other in a very different way. The final thing I was going to talk about is just Thinkful.net, which is a more recent thing, which is basically, it's effectively a search engine for the Internet of Things. So there's now loads of data out there, and if we leave it to, you know, these kind of, these high-tech Silicon Valley technology companies, those will all be closed repositories of data that have nothing to do with us, but which is being made, which is being used to make decisions about us. And so Thinkful, on the other hand, what we're trying to do is create a search engine for all the open data that's out there, because there is loads. Citizens are creating data, organizations have got open data platforms. You know, there are, for example, there are about 20 different air quality networks, large scale around the world. And so we search all those and present it so that if you want to find the nearest air quality monitor to your home, you can find the data from that sensor. Or if you want to find energy usage in Tokyo, for example, you can find sensors there. And so ultimately, this is about saying this stuff is already out there, and there's just a very thin layer to make it much more useful for people to build the tools that they need to on top. And so that's it. That's basically the idea. Engaging cities, get people actively involved in reimagining, rebuilding, and kind of, you know, effectively building a shared memory of the future. Because the only way we're going to get through the complex issues that we face is if we are all part of making decisions about that and what it looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. I think I mentioned this earlier to say that what I love about this conference is how it brings such different people together, right, with different ideas and different angles on attacking and analyzing different concepts. So as I mentioned to my previous guests, panelists, I would like you to imagine this your living room, right? And we are all your guests. So this is all about having a fireside chat kind of conversation. And each of you brought something different to the table, and I'd like to give you the opportunity now to perhaps respond to one another's presentations. I know you can touch a bit as well on some of the things that you wanted to speak about that you didn't have time to, but it would be great to hear your engagement and what did you think of, for example, what Tamara presented on, or Marvin, or yourself, Yusam. Yes, thank you.
I'd love for you to speak a little more about the stock exchange, was it called? I guess that what's interesting is that within our capitalist systems, the question of value and the exchange of value is kind of so important. I wonder whether you see ways to export that kind of idea, indicators basically of value, to other or learnings that could be taken to other cultural spheres as well.
Right, so, I mean, I think that I perhaps didn't explain this clearly, but there are two things that we're trying to do. The one is to create a community, a network, if you like, within which we can exchange skills, resources, and trade. And that's kind of not a stock exchange in the sense that anybody's making money. That we're trying to just make work, make art, and do it because theatre is expensive to make. And so we're trying to do it in a way that is keeping costs down. But the other thing we're trying to do is to monetize. And so, what was the question again? Sorry, I'm just trying to get runaway thoughts together. Right. Right, so one of the things we always fight about in a way within our industry is that, you know, you'll often hear artists and theatre makers saying, well, there's intrinsic worth to what we do. How do you put any kind of monetary value on, you know, whether it's that moment when you're sitting in the dark and you have you know, some kind of emotional healing that's happening, or you know, sometimes it's easier to track impact. I mean, there's a colleague of mine who has done incredible things in an environmental context, using theatre to mobilize communities to clean up illegal dumping, for example. And in that case, there would be probably, if someone had the time and energy to sit and do the accounting, you would probably be able to cost that, you know, what you're saving the city in terms of you're providing an actual service. And I think one of the challenges is that it is so diverse. So it would be a very interesting bit of research to really try and measure and track those things, both in monetary terms, but then also there is always that thing of, and I think that's partly why we were being so playful and deliberately disruptive with the idea of value and commerce, is that I think we need to recognize that there are some things that are not necessarily going to translate into capital and commerce.
It's quite interesting because, the question of which index do we track as the important one? I'm thinking about how in the US, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is it's the stock market indicator of how well the country's doing. And if you look at that, okay, fine, it goes up. But actually, as the Dow Jones goes up, so does suicide. So if we were tracking suicide as the indicator, we might say, no, this is not what we want.
Right. So, I mean, another way of looking at it would be the sort of a well-being economy. How do you have an indicator around well-being, which is not necessarily happiness, but it's, yeah. So, I mean, I think what I really enjoyed about your presentation was the comment about living with the complexity and actually encouraging the complexity to really go into the mess of things and understand that there aren't simple solutions.
Okay, I think I enjoyed most, I think the last part where you spoke of Thinkful.better, it gave me a bit of goosebumps. I just wanted to find out, so like the sensors that you're working with, are these like markers? Are they, like when they get the data, what's activating them? Is it voice, video, visual, or, yeah, maybe if you can explain more on that one.
Yeah, so it's thinkful.net, not better, but I'd like to have thinkful.net. So what's happening basically is that it's very much like the early search engines of the web. Even technically speaking, we're doing something a little bit like that. And so all of these sensors exist already, and they're owned and managed by other organizations. But they include everything from, let's say, the Air Quality Egg Network, which is a community network, to London's bike share scheme, where there are sensors on all the bikes, to radiation monitors in Japan, for example, or there are sensors on sharks and turtles. There are sensors on volcanoes, and there's seismographs, and all of this stuff is out there. And the organizations that have put it out there have explicitly made it open and available to others. But if you don't know about their website, if you don't know about I'm actually even forgetting myself what the earthquake network is, but there's 3 of them, then you wouldn't know where to find that data. And so all we're doing is we've built in translators. They're basically, we call them fetchers. They go out and on a periodic basis, just like web crawlers used to do in the early days of the web, we go out and we crawl all that data. We find out whether they're still alive, what data format they are in, what the current value is, and no matter what protocol or format it is, we convert it into something similar. So that when you then go and search for, let's say, pollution, that will include air quality, it'll include something that's called itself the AQ index, it'll also include something called pollution, and just returns all those results. So all the data is actually already out there, and it's being generated in many different ways, not just through our action. And we just have a relatively low-tech wrapper on it, if you like, to actually make it useful to ordinary people.
So people you then need a license, obviously, as you go on. If someone wants to plug into that data for a similar service, you then license it out.
It's actually not our data to license, but every data set, every different organization has one of probably about 10 different major licenses. But the ones we are indexing are largely either CC0, which is basically a total open data license, or some version of that, which is an open data license which grants you rights automatically to make use of it.
I think this is a great opportunity now to just open up the floor to some questions. I mean, that was some amazing presentations, and I know a lot of people would like to get. Oh, hi, I see you. Could we have a roaming mic right in front, please? So I'll take 3 questions all at one go, and then our panelists can then take it from there. Hands up, please. Thank you. 1, 2, 3. There you go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for all your contributions and sharing your practice with us. I know I have learned a lot. I have a question about living bodies and the smart city. So beyond commerce and beyond movement, what does repose or breath look like in the cities that you're hoping to advance? And do you consider it?
Okay, and then the gentleman over there, can we have your second question, please?
Hi, guys. My question is actually at Marvin, right? I'm just excited about 5G and what it's about to do, like, to your industry, right? So I just wanted to know, for you, like, where does the artistry begin and where does the tech begin? And how do you find the balance?
And then the lovely gentleman here with the green.
Hi, regarding the theater, have you looked at maybe, like, since you're dealing with actors, have you looked at digital training of maybe you training people online and making maybe money out of that, whereby people will be engaged in learning and will want to actually see the teachers acted out as well. Something like that, maybe one of the solutions you'll be looking at.
Okay, thank you. Panelists? Tamara, would you like to start?
I'm just trying to understand what you mean by digital training. But so training artists how to be more proficient in digital skills, or? Yeah, there are actually a couple of my colleagues who are starting to offer classes via Zoom, which I think is, I think, again, what I mentioned about my industry, actors are very precious about this thing of the body and the space, and digitality actually collapses time and space in a sense. You have this kind of sense of you don't have to be there in the room at the same time. So hence the digital classes would be, an absolutely great solution. And I think our kind of caution is always, yes, let's do those things, but let's not. I think there's a real fear about losing the liveness of being time. There's something about being. We work with breath, we work with physicality, we work with weight, and all those kinds of things. So I think we're catching up with this idea of how do we now translate this into an online forum, and the one that has taken hold and taken people's imagination is to do it via Zoom rather than just play a video and learn it like that. Although there's certainly space, and I think there is a lot of product out there around that. But yes, thank you for that.
Right. So, do you mind just expanding maybe on the first part of the question, where does the artistry begin? Just to elaborate more on that so that I can answer it fully.
Your industry, how do you find the right artist who wants to paint the whole canvas, right? And how do you find the tech mind who just wants to create what the artist wants to do, in a sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay. I think maybe I'll try to answer and put it into context to the product we're developing, Swagify.
Yeah.
So when we started, I think we started doing augmented reality in 2015, and we got on a bad foot when we started. You know, we had an investor that invested in us getting a license. Since this is live streaming, I won't say from which British company. You know, so basically we wasted money in a platform that we thought could do these crazy ideas that we had. You know, so. Which is why when we are like as we are building Swagify, as much as we want the AR, the tech side of augmented reality to be more interesting and to come out there, you discover that the platform would actually need, actually 10% or less than 10% of the AR element would be there. That's the one that then bridges that gap between your physical and digital. But for now, just picture Swagify as like a mall. We're building a mall, the infrastructure, and then the music stables are like the shops that are coming to our mall, you know. So we just want the fans to be able to connect like more intimately with the, you know. So then on the balance side, if I got you right, so with Swagify, it's a win-win situation, you know. The music producer is making money from Swagify. The fashion designer who's dressing an artist is making money. And also, yeah, so if the music producer, the fashion designer, and the musician, that's basically like the ecosystem. And most importantly, the fan, because what drives the music is the fans. You know, they're connecting more, they're identifying more with their artists. And then the last thing is, that's how Swagify was supposed to begin. But now discovering that there has to be a certain need that we have to answer, which is now on the cultural economies to say, what if Jay-Z is to wear a band made in South Africa, and everyone watching YouTube wants to wear that band, and that band, you know, like what's her name, the Ndebele lady in South Africa who did something for BMW? Esther Mahlangu, you know. So that was a good use case. But how can that be made more for everyone that is making, that's within the cultural economy. So basically we're trying to answer that. And obviously as we go on, collaborate with other people, how do we then build an AI that can, the problem we have now is, I think they're sorting it out, like where facial recognition doesn't read black faces that well, you know, which is something that I think is being worked on. But even when it comes to fashion, AI must be able to read and to detect and to analyze African elements within the fashion side of things. I hope I didn't just go all around.
And the first question, I think, was about rest and repose in the smart city. The short answer to the question is no, I've never specifically worked on something like that. Because usually what I'm interested in is collective action, like people doing things together. So if I was to do something like that, it would probably be lots of people sleeping together or something like that, which is a different avenue of research. But I would say that I think part of your question is kind of about the downtime and about like, does the city and the experience of this technology city have to be frantic and have to be all about the technology? And I think I would say absolutely not. In fact, if anything, the city should, the smart city, smart city, shitty smart city, the smart city should be about people being able to make the decisions about what they need and what they and their neighbors need together, if you see what I mean. And so it shouldn't be about the technology. It should be more about the sense of empowerment, ultimately. The decision to log off or the decision not to be part of something. People who don't participate, in my experience, are as important as the people who participate. In any participatory system, you actually almost have to design for the people who don't want to be part of it as much as the people who do want to be part of it. So actually, I think you've kind of raised a very important point, which is kind of the blurry stuff around the boundaries is kind of more significant than the crystal clear, sharp technology that might appear to be in the center, if I've understood you correctly.
Yeah. Thank you, audience, for those amazing questions. As we wrap up this session, I'd like our panelists, perhaps in closing, if you could, in a sentence or two, what would you want the audience to walk away with, specifically from your presentation?
No, you go first.
Okay, I think it's time for us to really get involved in the, in the village setup, global village setup. There's always the elders in the villages. So in terms of creatives and tech people, it's time for us to take a seat where the decisions are being made so that we can map up a good future for us and the robots that are coming.
I think I'd like people to walk away with a sense of enormous possibility and to be excited about that possibility, but for it to also come with the proviso that as much as we fall in love with the technology, it's always important to balance it with the humanity. I guess that would be and that the scarcest resource, whether it's for advertisers or app creators or solution creators or marketers, is the user's attention, the user's time and attention.
I would say that the thing I'd like you to take away is this idea that the future is not yet determined, and it is not inevitable that either good or bad things are going to happen. It's up to us to actually create that future. It's up to us to actually decide that it's important to even think about the future. We might not all agree on it. In fact, we definitely will not all agree on what the right future is, and I have no idea really what the best future is. But where technology is involved, we have to take back control ourselves for the ways that it can be designed and deployed and used, so that actually we are all part of designing that future. And that's really the only way we're going to get through the next 50 years.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time for questions, but I'm sure you guys are still around. Yes. So you can catch our speakers as they go out. So a round of applause for our panelists, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right now, we are jumping straight ahead into the next segment, which is the game changers. And I love this concept of game changers because for me, it speaks to disrupting the status quo. And I'm a bit of a rebel, so when I hear things like this, topics like this, I really get revved up. Before I invite our next speaker on the stage, I just want to make sure that our audience is still with me. Are you guys still here? Are you still feeling the energy? Because I'm not getting it. I'm not feeling that thing. So I know what's going to wake you up, right? A reminder that rent is due. If you haven't been tweeting, I know, I can see you. Please tweet using the hashtag #OwnYourForce.